Hi everyone. I will just type this one. Hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I will present one aspect of data science for social good, and I will talk about a recent project that we have finished we are working on in the Penn Media Accountability Project in the CSS lab, which is looking at partisan news segregation in TV and web. So we are living in the era of digital data and digital technologies, social media, online space, and it has changed the way we are receiving information, we interact, we socialize with people, and the way we make decisions about our life. But similar to any other technology, digital technology has been also accompanied with unexpected benefits and harms. For example, many of us may have seen headlines such as Instagram or Facebook hurting teenagers, YouTube is radicalizing everybody, or social media is hurting our democracy. And it has driven a tremendous amount of attention in the last two election cycles to the problem of partisan news segregation, echo chambers, filter bubbles. And when academics are looking for the problems, is mainly focused on fake news and online space, and it's not a surprise given how digital technology, social media have tremendously changed and transformed the information ecosystem. But where do we actually get our information? That's the question. Is it true, even though the narrative is about, oh, like everybody is getting their news from online space and fake news is extremely prevalent, but going to looking at the data, where do we get our information? Is it all online space and everything is fake news? What about the traditional media? How does it compare in a scale? And in the whole information ecosystem, like what fraction is actually news? And inside that news, what fraction of the information that we are actually consuming is fake news? So we like to look at the data to answer this question rather than relying on anecdotes and like our perception of the world when we are talking with our friends. So putting everything into context, in a recent study by Duncan Watts, they found that in fact, when we compare TV with online, you see that more than 5 times consumption on TV is higher. So it seems like TV is still the major source of news for Americans, and fake news is just about 1% of news. So even though the focus has been on the study of fake news and online space, it seems like TV has been understudied. And in fact, fake news and lying is not the only way that things can go wrong. It can be misleading, and news can be misleading by the headline. It can be misleading by amplification. It can be misleading by cherry picking. Instead of looking at 10 years, the whole period, you can just pick a part that has like a specific trends that you like to talk about, or it can be misleading through agenda setting. So what we want to do is, instead of relying on anecdotes as data scientists and people who love data, we want to go back to data and look, instead of generalizing from a small sample size and unrepresentative samples, we want to make inference from data which is representative, large scale, and holistic. And we want to first understand the scale of the problem, how big is the problem that we are thinking, we are hearing, and the headlines, and how it's happening. Then we can think about interventions and policy interventions and thinking about the solutions. Because as far as our understanding of the problem is just based on a little corner of universe that we are looking at, then it would be heavily biased. So to look at, going back to the problem of news segregation and echo chambers, we look at 2 panels of representative of American news consumers on TV and online, with more than 500,000 panelists on TV, 350,000 panelists online. And we also further look at the content which has been produced by the stations. So when people are consuming news, what is the content that has produced by these TV stations? So at first, we simply look at what is the major news source of Americans, where we can see, in fact, for people who are consuming the more partisan side, on TV, the consumption is about 3 times bigger than online. So TV has more segregated news consumers around the partisan news. And next, we just look at it in an unsupervised approach. We want to find the latent behavior and latent patterns of news consumption. And when we compare TV with online space, we find that, in fact, when we look at the archetype of news consumption on TV, we find more unimodal news consumption patterns, and it will accumulate for 20% of American news consumer on TV, where in comparison in online is only accounting for 6% of news consumer online. And when we look at the top and the last news archetype, we see that there is more diverse pattern compared with TV. So not only is there are more people who are in news segregation communities, but also they have more unimodal consumption pattern. But how long do we stay in their communities? So we look at how many consecutive months people stay in these communities of unimodal consumption pattern. Where again, what we find is that compared to online, it's 10 times and 4 times more likely to stay in left and right communities on TV. So people change and stick to the change less and stick to the TV stations that they are watching more on TV. But where do they go when they change their news source on TV? So there is more move toward the cable partisan news, MSNBC and Fox News. And in fact, the greatest move is going from centrist and other stations and hard news to no news at all. So it seems that we are losing some news consumers on TV. But where do they go? When we are losing these news consumers, we are losing more news consumer on network news. So network news is providing more shared reality and shared information for Americans, but it seems like cable news is keeping its audience, but where we are missing the audience on TV is dropping from national network news. So there is this larger community of partisan news segregation on TV. We found that it's keeping its audience on more partisan cable news. And the next question is, things are even worse if the content that these stations are producing is actually different. Because if you tell me that, okay, it's okay, MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News, they are producing the shared reality for everybody is receiving the same information, that's another story, compared to the fact that, in fact, what they are receiving is also different. So even though most of the work stop at the station level studies and they say, okay, you are getting information from Fox, you are getting information from MSNBC or CNN, we also want to look at, is it actually the content that they are producing is different? So we look at more than 30 different topics using unsupervised and deep learning techniques. We can talk about more technical details if anyone is interested later. So we look at the trends over 10 years, and then we want to see if actually the attention of this station is different, is changing, is diverging over the time. For example, China is being more covered after 2017, or election is by Fox News, and election is more recently being more covered by MSNBC. So it seems like they are diverging in the amount of attention and time they spend to talk about different topics. But what about the perspective that they are presenting? What about the narrative? Is actually the narrative that they are providing also diverging, is getting more different, or what we choose as baseline is network news. So we take the network news as baseline and we want to compare how different is becoming the content being produced by Fox News and MSNBC. So these are some examples to give you tell you what I mean by narratives or a story that they are providing. So for example, when we look at the topic abortion, among the most frequent engrams that we find from Fox News is ban abortion compared to MSNBC, which is pro-life. Or when we look at the topic Iran, what we see from Fox News is bad deal when MSNBC is talking about or using the word Iran nuclear deal. For topic COVID, we can see that Fox News is mostly using the engram mask don't work compared to MSNBC, which is reporting people are wearing masks. So these are the differences that we want to capture computationally. And what we want to do is going across different topics on hard news, we want to see if over the time things are changing, getting worse, or staying the same. So we see that the patterns is actually different for different topics. So what we do is we pick a vector representation, and then we compare the vector representation of these different topics from cable news station, and we compare it with national news. So if the vectors are closer, the value is smaller, and if things are less partisan, if it's getting bigger, the values would be bigger, they will diverge, and everything would be more polarized and partisan. And the value 0.5 is the probability that Fox News, the news is coming from Fox News or national, is the same, so 0.5 is our baseline. But we can see, in fact, over the time, it seems like after 2017, for most of the topics, things are getting worse and they are getting more divergent in terms of the way they are presenting. So here, we don't know, we cannot, based on this result, we cannot say if when one of the stations is talking about a topic, is pro that topic, is against that topic, but we are only observing, and things that are being presented are different, and it shows that perhaps we are losing or the shared reality that we had before. So to summarize, what we observed was that when we look at the data, regardless where the narrations and are telling us, in fact, on TV, there is a growing community of news segregation, and people who are in these segregated communities are staying more in their community on TV compared to online. And in fact, American states on news is reducing on TV from national network stations and is more absorbing toward the partisan side. And when we look at the content, we observe that for a subset of topics, in fact, the content that is being presented also is diverging, is getting more different. That's all. Thank you all. Happy to take your questions.